My son looked at me, his expression shifting between expectant confidence and veiled irritation, then glanced at his wife, who offered a tight, practiced smile. "Mom," he began, the word feeling less like a term of endearment and more like the start of a transaction. "We've been talking, Sarah and I, about the future. Our future. And, well, we need the house." He wasn't asking. He was stating. My second house. The one I'd bought as an investment, a quiet place to escape, never intended for anyone else. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe families should protect, not exploit each other, hit that like button and subscribe for more. He said they needed it, as if my property was merely an unused resource waiting to be claimed, until I realized my own family saw me as nothing more than a source of money, a bank with an emotional attachment. It wasn't the first time they'd asked for something significant, not by a long shot. Over the years, after my husband passed, I'd helped them both financially and practically, assuming that's what families did. I supported their education, helped with down payments on their first car, their first apartment. My daughter was independent, but my son, Mark, and his wife, Sarah, seemed to view my generosity as a tap that should always be on. They'd come to expect it, maybe even feel entitled to it. It hurt, a dull ache that had grown over time, but this felt different. This felt like a line being crossed, a demand that threatened to unravel everything. What I discovered next would force me to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. I was a woman in my late 60s, widowed 5 years prior. My life had been comfortable, built on my late husband's careful planning and my own modest inheritance from my parents. I owned 2 houses, the one I lived in, a comfortable bungalow filled with memories, and the smaller property about an hour away, which I'd purchased simply because it was a good investment at the time and offered a peaceful retreat. My finances were secure, managed meticulously since my husband's death. I had savings, investments, and a good pension. I wasn't wealthy by any means, but I was independent and comfortable. My son, Mark, was 38, and his wife, Sarah, 35. They had 2 children, my grandchildren, whom I adored. Mark worked in middle management. Sarah was a stay-at-home mother. Their financial situation always seemed precarious, at least according to them. There was always a new expense, a car repair, a school trip, a medical bill. I'd stepped in countless times, providing loans that were rarely, if ever, fully repaid, or outright gifts for things I felt the grandchildren needed. I didn't mind helping, they were my family. But lately, the requests had become larger, the expectations clearer. Comments about how much the second house must be worth, how it was just sitting there, had become more frequent. Mark would sigh about their cramped apartment. Sarah would talk wistfully about a place with a yard for the children. I heard snippets of conversations I wasn't meant to, veiled comments about mom's resources and future plans. Once, I overheard Sarah on the phone, not realizing I was in the next room. "Honestly," she'd said, her voice tight with impatience, "it makes no sense for her to keep that place. It's just gathering dust. It could be ours, you know? It's practically inheritance waiting to happen." The casual way she spoke, as if my property was already theirs in principle, sent a shiver down my spine. My trust in them, already chipped, began to crack. I loved Mark, my son, and I wanted him and his family to be secure. My generosity had stemmed from that love, from a desire to ease their burdens. But hearing Sarah articulate that sense of entitlement so coldly, detached from any consideration for my feelings or needs, felt like a cold splash of reality. My life was grounded in routine, quiet contentment, and the simple pleasure of knowing I was secure and able to help those I loved. That foundation suddenly felt shaky. The direct demand, however, felt like an earthquake. It wasn't a tentative question, not a hopeful, "If you ever considered selling?" It was presented as a logical, almost inevitable step. Mark sat across from me, leaning forward earnestly. "Mom," He repeated, "We need a bigger place. For the kids. The market is impossible, you know? We can't afford anything decent around here." Sarah nodded solemnly, adding, "And the house, your second house, it's perfect. It's closer to good schools than our current place. It just makes so much sense for us to have it." Mark chimed in, "We wouldn't expect you to just give it to us, of course." I felt a flicker of relief, thinking perhaps they meant a discounted sale, a manageable purchase. Then he finished the sentence, "Not exactly. We were thinking maybe you could transfer ownership as an early inheritance? We could handle the taxes, probably early inheritance." They wanted a property worth several $100,000 handed over to them, essentially for free. My mind reeled. This wasn't about need. This was about greed. It was about taking what they felt was rightfully theirs before I was even gone. My initial reaction was shock, a physical jolt that made my hands tremble. My son, my own flesh and blood, was demanding a significant portion of my life savings, framing it as a practical necessity. Hurt flooded in, sharp and sudden. How could they be so blunt, so entitled? I looked at their faces, expectant, showing no sign of shame or embarrassment, only a mild impatience that I wasn't immediately agreeing. A wave of nausea washed over me. I mumbled something about needing time to think, about consulting my advisor, just to get them out of my house. As soon as the door closed behind them, the initial disbelief gave way to a cold, hard realization. They weren't just asking for help, they were trying to divest me of my assets. This wasn't love, it was calculation. That night, I pulled out the deed to the second house, my will, and my financial statements. I needed to understand exactly what I owned, what was at risk, and what my options were. It was a small, quiet first step, born not of panic, but a dawning resolve. I needed information. Their demands didn't stop. After that initial conversation, the pressure intensified. Mark called the next day, then again the day after. Sarah sent texts, subtly laced with guilt. "The kids are so excited about the possibility of a yard, or it would mean the world to our family stability." The subtle manipulation escalated into overt badgering. They started involving other family members, distant cousins who barely knew me but were susceptible to a sob story about a poor young family struggling, and an elderly relative with more than she needs. My sister-in-law, bless her pragmatic soul, called me directly. "Mary, Mark and Sarah have been talking to Brenda, saying you're being difficult about the second house. Something about them needing it? Is everything all right?" I kept my answers vague, unwilling to spill the full, ugly truth yet, but the call confirmed they were campaigning. I felt cornered, the walls closing in. This pressure, however, didn't break me, it hardened my resolve. I started documenting everything, every call, every text, every chance encounter where the subject was brought up. I kept a small notebook by the phone, jotting down dates, times, and the exact wording of their requests and passive-aggressive comments. I saved every text message, every email. It felt clandestine, almost wrong, but a quiet voice inside told me it was necessary. They were building a narrative. I needed to preserve the facts. My next step was crucial. I needed professional advice. I made an appointment with Evelyn, a lawyer specializing in elder law and estate planning. I walked into her office feeling nervous and exposed, but I left feeling armed. Evelyn listened patiently as I laid out the situation, detailing the history of my generosity, the escalating demands, and the recent ultimatum regarding the second house. She was calm and knowledgeable. She confirmed, unequivocally, that the house was mine, free and clear, to do with as I pleased. My will, as it stood, divided my estate equally between my two children. She explained how easily I could change that, how I could protect my assets, and the legal steps required. "They have no legal claim to that house while you're alive, Mary," she stated firmly. "Nor do they have a guaranteed claim after you're gone. Your will is your decision." That conversation was a turning point. It shifted my perspective from feeling like a victim of their demands to an individual with rights and options. Armed with legal knowledge, My strategy began to form, quiet and methodical. I continued documenting, the small notebook filling up. I started subtly shifting some investments, consolidating accounts, making sure my financial affairs were even more impenetrable should they ever try something drastic, like challenging my competency, a fear Evelyn had gently mentioned as a potential, though often unsuccessful, tactic in such disputes. The pressure from Mark and Sarah intensified. They seemed to sense my hesitation, my withdrawal. Mark became sullen, Sarah tearful on the phone, claiming I was abandoning them and prioritizing property over family. The second mandatory micro-cameo happened during a strained Sunday dinner. Sarah, visibly frustrated by my polite but firm deflection of any house talk, finally snapped. "Honestly, Mary," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness that didn't hide the steel beneath, "you don't even need that house. It's just sitting there empty most of the time. It's not fair to keep it from us when we're struggling so much and the children need space. It's practically our inheritance anyway, isn't it?" Just tied up, Mark quickly added, "Yeah, Mom. It makes sense to just sort this out now. It avoids probate issues later. It's practical for them." They weren't even pretending it was solely for the grandchildren anymore. They admitted it was about their perceived inheritance. That moment sealed it. The last vestiges of doubt, the hope that this was just temporary financial stress driving poor judgment, evaporated. This was calculated, cold, and utterly self-serving. They saw my death as an event that would unlock their access to my assets, and they were simply trying to speed up the process. My resolve solidified into something unbreakable. I wasn't just protecting my property, I was protecting my dignity, my independence, and the principle that love and respect were not conditional on financial gain. I stopped entertaining their calls and visits as frequently, citing being busy. I didn't argue or explain, I simply became unavailable. While they were busy complaining about my supposed selfishness, to anyone who would listen, I was quietly taking action. I contacted a trusted real estate agent, someone discreet who understood I needed a quick, quiet sale. I started getting appraisals. My plan was simple: take away the object of their obsession, legally and irrevocably secure my finances, and redraw the boundaries of my family relationships. The smoking gun arrived unexpectedly. A week after the disastrous Sunday dinner, Sarah accidentally forwarded me an email thread meant for her friend. It was titled Operation House Plan. It detailed their strategy, how to pressure me, who in the extended family to get on side, how they would emphasize the grandchildren's needs, and contingency plans if I resisted. One line sent a chill down my spine. "If she still won't budge, Mark thinks we might be able to argue she's not thinking clearly." Dr. Adams signed off on that thing for his mother, remember. Dr. Adams was a local GP known to be flexible. They were contemplating questioning my mental capacity if I didn't give them the house. It wasn't just greed, it was malicious. This email, along with the notebook full of demands and saved texts, became my ultimate legal weapon. Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she read it. "This," she said, tapping the printout, "shows intent. It's very powerful documentation. With this definitive proof of their calculated manipulation and potential legal threats, I moved forward decisively. I finalized the sale agreement for the second house. I'd received a fair, all-cash offer that could close quickly. I instructed Evelyn to update my will immediately. My daughter remained a beneficiary, but Mark and Sarah were explicitly disinherited, receiving only a nominal amount as required by some legal technicalities we discussed, but nothing of real value. The bulk of my estate, after providing for my daughter, would go to a charity supporting local women's shelters, a cause I deeply believed in. I also had Evelyn draft a formal letter stating that I was aware of their attempts to pressure me, that the house had been sold, my will updated, and any future attempts to contact me regarding finances or property would be handled by her office. It was a quiet, internal moment of triumph. While Mark and Sarah were likely stewing, confident I would eventually buckle under pressure, I had already secured my future and rendered their scheme obsolete. Their overconfidence was their downfall. They were so focused on manipulating me that they never imagined I would act so decisively and so secretly to remove the very thing they desired. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet delivery of a certified letter. Evelyn sent the letter to Mark and Sarah via registered mail. It was concise, factual, and delivered the blow. It stated that, acting on her client's instructions, Ms. Mary Thompson wished to inform them that her second property had been sold and the transaction finalized. It also confirmed that her estate planning had been reviewed and significantly updated, and that they should direct any future inquiries regarding her financial or property matters to Evelyn's law firm. The letter contained no emotion, no explanation, just legal facts. The immediate aftermath was exactly as Evelyn predicted, shock followed by panic. My phone rang incessantly. Mark called, his voice initially demanding, then sputtering with disbelief, finally turning to anger and threats. Sarah sent a barrage of texts, oscillating between furious accusations, "How could you? After everything," and tearful pleas, "Think of the grandchildren. You're leaving them with nothing." They accused me of being cruel, of being manipulated myself, ironic, I thought, of being senile. I did not answer their calls. I did not respond to the texts. I remained calm, grounded by the knowledge that I had acted logically, legally, and protectively. My only response was silence, or occasionally, a brief, neutral text stating, "Please refer to the letter from my attorney." The truth inevitably began to surface within the extended family. The cousins they had tried to enlist came back to me, bewildered. "Mary, Mark and Sarah said you just suddenly sold the house out of spite? Is that true?" I didn't have to explain or defend myself much. I simply shared the email Sarah had accidentally sent. The Operation House plan, I didn't add commentary. The words spoke for themselves. Seeing their written plan to manipulate and potentially discredit me was more powerful than any explanation I could offer. Shame fell upon Mark and Sarah among the relatives they had tried to turn against me. Their final desperation tactics were pathetic. Mark showed up at my house, unannounced, begging, then raging. He accused me of ruining his life, of not being a real mother. Sarah sent photos of the grandchildren, captioned with sad faces, trying to play on my emotions one last time. I closed the door to Mark. I blocked Sarah's number. In the immediate aftermath, my house felt quiet, peaceful. The storm had raged outside, but I had secured my inner sanctuary. The sale of the second house was finalized, the funds safely in my account. My will was updated, my financial future protected. Mark and Sarah faced the consequences of their actions: no house, no expected inheritance, and the harsh judgment of family members who now saw their true nature. They had gambled on my love and generosity, believing it made me weak, and lost everything. My life now had clear boundaries, enforced not by anger, but by a quiet, still certainty. I spent time with my daughter, who supported my decision, appalled by her brother's behavior. I found peace not in retribution, but in protection. The relationship with Mark and Sarah was permanently changed, fractured beyond repair by their own hands. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.